All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Soil Health Institute McCain joint webinar of making cover crops pay in potatoes. My name is Mac Bean. I'm the lead agronomist for Eastern North America for McCain Foods. And I'll excuse my counterpart in the West, Amanda Crook. She's the Western lead agronomist for North America for McCain's, and she's traveling today, so we'll excuse her. So just before we begin, Cam from the Soil Health Institute, and I'll introduce Cam here in just a minute, but he has a polling question for us to answer for those participating in the webinar today. The question is, where are you joining from? Western North America, Central North America, Eastern, or outside of North America? So if you take just a minute and answer the question for us, that would be great. Okay. So before we talk, I guess, about the panelists and we welcome them and I'll introduce them, we're committed, both of the Soil Health Institute and McCain Foods, to safety. So we have just a quick safety moment. So during the summer, we know with the hot, dry weather, it's important to stay hydrated. So just a few quick bullet points to point out the severity of being dehydrated. So if you're feeling thirsty, you're already dehydrated. And the actual definition of being dehydrated is a 1% loss of your body mass due to fluid loss, right? So 60% of our body mass is made up of water. So if you lose just 1% of that, you are considered to be dehydrated. And then this 1% loss or dehydration can actually cause a 20 to 40% loss in physical energy level, depending on the severity of the temperature outside. And then with that physical kind of draining of energy, there's also a mental tax that being dehydrated takes. So it lowers or degrades your cognitive function, it increases your anxiety, and even can cause some short-term memory loss. So just a quick safety call out. Stay hydrated while we're working out in the fields, or even at home when you're messing around in the yard or with your kids or on vacation, just to stay hydrated. So just a quick plug too about both the Soil Health Institute and McCain Foods' commitment to sustainability and regenerative ag. We at McCain's feel like the partnership with the Soil Health Institute to help train us and teach us about the soil health practices and can really aid us in our quest to become more sustainable. We've seen the McCain Regenerative Ag Framework and the different indicators on there, and we feel like this partnership with the Soil Health Institute can help us achieve those indicators. The purpose of this specific webinar is to explore profitable strategies for integrating cover crops into the potato system. And with that, we have a second poll question just to kind of gauge where people's experience level is with cover crops. And so if you don't mind taking just a quick moment to fill out that poll, I think Cam will bring it up here in just a second. Perfect. This webinar is being recorded. And so just, you should have gotten a prompt as you were entering the meeting just to let you know that. But in case you missed it, now you know. And then the webinar, because it's being recorded, it will be posted, or we'll send it to those who registered for the webinar if you're unable to stay for the whole webinar or make it. So you should get a link afterwards. And then I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. So we have Dr. B. Kim from the University of Maine. We have Dr. Ray Quinn from Oregon State. We have Lad Wahlen. He's an ag producer and co-owner of Roots Potato Chips in Idaho. We have Dr. Manphool Fageria. He's with McCain Foods, the Farm of the Future in New Brunswick, Canada. And then we have Dr. Mohammad Khakbazan he's a research scientist from Agriculture and Agrifood Canada. And then we also have Dr. Mike Copas, senior agronomist at Wysocki family of companies in Wisconsin, USA. And Mike just saved 15% on his car insurance by switching to Geico. So, and with that, Cam, I'll So Cam's gonna be our moderator today. He's a soil health educator at the Soil Health Institute. And Cam, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mac. You always get me with that Geico one, so thank you. Hey, this is great, folks. What we're going to do here is we've kind of got a three-part act. So what we're going to do is we've got a bunch of researchers on the call, and we've got some, more on the growing side of things, the production side of things on the call. And so we're going to have a bit of a conversation with both, and we're going to bring them all back together at the end, kind of have a cross-sectional conversation with the researchers and the growers. And then finally, we're going to open up to you for Q&A. So if you've got questions, put them in the Q&A at the bottom. I think that you should have the opportunity to be able to upvote. And, if you see questions that you like, bump those up to the top. And then that should be able to make for a great discussion at the end. This is a 90-minute webinar, so we should be wrapping up, 85 minutes or so from now. Should be good. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to invite our three growers to join me now. So we've got Lad and Mike and Manphool, and we're just going to kick this off a little bit by having a conversation. I think, first of all, we got this topic, making cover crops pay in potatoes. I did my master's research in cover crops, and actually when I was doing my master's, I actually ended up calling them service crops for that time, because I just felt like cover crops was too narrow. We were just talking about growing things to cover the soil, and they do so much more than that. So what I want to first ask the three of you is, when we say cover crops, what does that all mean for you? What does that encompass in your system? So what are all the different ways that you are using crops kind of in this way to improve your soil, improve your business case? That's also a big part of what this is about, is the economics of it all. So why don't we, we're going to be running west to east a bunch of times here, but Lad, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about, what does cover crops mean to you? How would you define that?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say I appreciate Cam for putting this together. I think it's an awesome opportunity to bring together professionals and growers and discuss these things that are super important, like soil health, regenerative agriculture, sustainability. And yeah, to jump right into it. So cover crops, to me, what a cover crop is it's something that's planted with a beneficial intent or purpose that's not going to be taken to harvest. So like you said, I don't think it's just for covering the soil, but it's to create an ecosystem that's beneficial for your crop, in addition to helping the soil be healthy and increase that soil biology. So I think there's a lot of purposes that a cover crop can do.
Nice. Mike, want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on service crop, because the cover crop is there to aid the cash crops that we have interspaced. It's whether the cover crop is interspaced or the cash crop is interspaced. But in thinking about how we develop an entire system and integrate both what we're growing for a profit, and also how we're enabling other crops to serve those.
Nice. Manphool, anything to round that out? Oh, you're going to want to unmute yourself. I told the panelists I'd give someone a prize, so I owe you a prize, Manphool. You're the first.
Thank you. Well, so for me, like how I take it, so sometimes I can use my cash crop as a cover crop as well. And I just want to give an example. So like in Eastern Canada here, in Maritimes, we cannot plant anything after potatoes because it's too cold, but we can plant winter wheat. So during winter time, winter wheat can cover our plant. So it's like kind of cover crop, but the next year we can harvest it as a cash crop. So cover crops can be your cash crop too.
Right. So kind of, blurring those lines a little bit of saying, hey, this crop is going to benefit the soil. It's going to protect it over the winter time. I also get an economic benefit as well, harvesting it directly. You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so with that kind of out of the way, what we're going to do here is we're going to go back west to east again. And these three growers are just going to share with you a bit of their story kind of related to cover crops. What's their experience look like? So Lad, we're going to kick it off with you once again. Got a couple pictures here to go along with.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just to explain a little bit, I think it's good to understand what my goals. I think we all have goals of what we're trying to accomplish with cover crops. So specifically, what am I trying to accomplish with cover crops? So with my cover cropping system, what I'm trying to accomplish in a potato cropping system is to create an environment or ecosystem, as well as increase and stimulate the soil biology to a point where it's conducive for healthy and resilient potatoes. And then in the end, I'm able to reduce or eliminate certain synthetic inputs. So for example, synthetic fertilizer, or maybe insecticides or fungicides. So that's what my whole goal is around my cover cropping process and system and how it incorporates. So yeah, I sent a few pictures to Cam, and I'll just kind of explain a little bit about what I'm doing. But now knowing what my purpose or goal is, it'll probably help everybody understand why I'm doing this. So for example, this picture was just taken a couple weeks ago. So what this is, these are pollinator strips that are going throughout commercial potato fields. So we've got several pollinator strips. They're multi-species. So this is a 17 species pollinator strip. So what am I doing? Why am I doing it? So it all has to coincide with what my goal is. So what I'm trying to do here is attract beneficial insects. So the ladybugs, the lacewings, the honeybees, the predatory wasps. So anything that's going to come and benefit that potato crop, that's going to be able to prey on harmful insects. So what I'm seeing is, by doing this, am I able to reduce or eliminate the need for insecticides? And we've got sticky traps out. We're trying to very, very much assess this and have data to how we're attracting beneficial insects and how we're reducing the number of harmful insects. And to this point, we haven't had to apply an insecticide on this. So we've seen some good promising things from these pollinator strips so far. So that's the initial photo. And then Cam, if you want to swipe, we'll go into the next one. Okay, so this is companion cropping in potatoes. So we've got a multi-species companion crop that is interseeded with our commercial potato crop. So why do we do this? Once again, we're trying to create an ecosystem that is conducive for potato health. So once again, we're attracting those beneficial insects, those beneficial predatory insects, and eliminating or reducing a need for certain insecticides. And in addition to that, we have multiple root systems in the soil, and we've been able to do SAP tests, PLFA tests, soil biology tests, and everything has come back with greater indicators of soil biology in companion cropping systems versus just a monoculture system. So there's a lot of promising things there, and we're able to benefit. We're bringing in more beneficial insects. We're stimulating the soil biology. And in addition to that, we're fixing a little bit of nitrogen, and we're diversifying in the soil. So what we've seen from this has been promising, and it's been good. And we can take bits and pieces and modify our companion crop next year, and we have data. And to me, data is super important. We need the data. We need to know what's going on, if it's benefiting, if it's not benefiting, how we can tweak it. But yeah, that's so far with our companion cropping. And then Cam, if you want to swipe again. Okay, so this is a section, so this is a spring wheat field that is preceding potatoes. So we'll plant potatoes in here next year. And this is a section that was completely dedicated to soil health building this year. So why am I doing that? Maybe I could profit a couple $100 an acre on grain if I'm lucky, maybe. But maybe if I increase the soil biology and improve it, it might pay out dividends in my potato crop next year. So this year, this section is completely devoted to soil health and promotion and diversity, and to see what happens next year. Is that going to be able to give my potatoes a head start? Is it going to put the biology in a place where these plants are more resilient and can fend off pests or fungus or whatever that may be? So once again, all three of these photos, they're all revolved around what I can do to create a soil biology and an ecosystem that is beneficial for potato cropping systems. And in the end, what will this enable me to do as far as reducing my inputs, synthetic inputs or whatever else that might be? So yeah, these are, and I'm by no means an expert. I'm just a grower and I have my experience. And there's been lots of promising things that are happening. And I have a very a bright perspective of what growers and researchers and professionals can accomplish in the years to come with data and the tools that are available to us. And so, yeah, I would just challenge any growers out there too, if just try to figure out what your goal is for cover crops, what you want to do, and then assess it from there, because you're going to pick your cover cropping systems. You're going to move it into your rotation based on your goals. So try to assess some goals. What are you trying to accomplish, and go from there. I think it'll be great.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lad. Hey, and just a reminder, folks, if you've got questions for Lad, put those in the Q&A. We're going to have plenty of time to be able to address those there at the end. So thank you, Lad. Mike, I'm going to move on to you next. What's your story? What's your goal, and how do cover crops fit into your system?
Yeah, so we're located in the central part of Wisconsin, a very, I'll call it a highly erodible sand soil that we're on. It's almost hydroponic, so we're very short distance to groundwater. So in most cases, about 6 to 8 feet to groundwater on very coarse sand soils. I think if you back up to the early 90s, there was a big push to get cover crops into our vegetable system. And we have, and one of the challenges is that we have a very intensive vegetable system. In some cases, we're growing 4 vegetable crops in 6 years. 6 vegetable crops in 4 years. And so there's a lot of disturbance that's taking place in our soils. And so the real concern was on our shoulder seasons, the spring and the fall, when we have open ground and we have a lot of wind during those time periods. We had a lot of erosion. And so we were very successful in getting cover crops like rye and oats in place either before or after our vegetable crops, and had good success in controlling the erosion that was taking place with the wind. And fast forward to say the last 7, 8, 10 years, that focus has started to shift. And so now as we look at cover crops, there's a lot of pressure environmentally and legislatively to manage our groundwater, to manage our impact on the ecosystem that we have here. And so those goals have shifted to more nutrient management and minimizing our impact to our close groundwater, then disease reduction, because that means reduction of greenhouse gases, it means reduction of carbon inputs, those kinds of things. And then also soil productivity. If we can grow better crops, healthier crops, and more productive crops in the same amount of acres or less acres, that reduces our footprint, and it allows us to produce and be just as profitable on less acres and have less of an impact to the area around us. And so really it's about managing kind of the shoulder seasons, or where we're most susceptible to losing our inputs. And so I'll talk a little bit about the 2 different systems that we've looked at. This is more of a perennial system. And when we're managing these cover crops, we're talking about the entirety of our rotation. We're not just focused on that potato crop. We're talking about how do we manage peas, green beans, sweet corn, field corn, soybeans, and potatoes, and carrots, all within this vegetable system. And so where we're headed, I think, is into more of a perennial system. This is what you're looking at is clover that was established in a green bean crop. And so the idea is with a perennial system, can we extend that perennial for multiple crops and get the benefit? Because the perennials, legumes that we're using are fairly leaky. They're not the best at holding nitrogen, but that's what is beneficial for that cash crop that's next to us. So can we capture nitrogen that's removed or fixed from those crops, capture it with the cash crop, and actually extend that cover crop for multiple seasons to take advantage of it until we get to potato? and then you have a plow down and take the nitrogen credit on the legume that you've incorporated. So if you go to the next one, Cam, and so you can see here's a following sweet corn crop. So this would be the year after the green bean, and you can see in the understory, in this case we have alfalfa, but where we've seen the benefit, we've seen up to 10-ton yielding sweet corn with no nitrogen applied. So we know there's a huge benefit if we can have these companion crops with but the challenge is it's about managing the system then. And so we have a lot of different companies. Our canning industry is harvesting this crops, and they have one major concern, and that is residue. And so we have to manage that cover crop residue, because here's a situation where in the spring, the schedule is very flexible for them, and they may extend out 2 to 3 weeks beyond when you were supposed to plant. And then you end up with a lot of residue. And then if you click that next picture, Cam, this is, to them, is an unacceptable amount of residue because that can get taken up by the bean combines or the pea pickers and end up in a can or end up in a bag of frozen peas or beans. And that is an issue. So we're trying to balance managing cover crops in this very intense rotation. And so that's kind of where we're coming from on cover crops.
Thanks, Mike. That is quite the balancing act that you've got going on there. Lots of things
Absolutely.
Manphool, we're going to end off with you. Tell us a little bit about your story, your goals with cover crops.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Well, so in McCain, so first of all, I'm located in New Brunswick, Canada, and in McCain, we have started growing cover crops over 10 years, and we also have been selling the seed of cover crops, multi-species to our growers. But for the last 3 years, we have started planting cover crops at the Farm of the Future. And in this particular field, what we did is that we planted cover crops in spring. Those included some legumes, some brassica, and some grasses. And then during fall, we prepared the ground, prepared the hills, planted the cover crops. And then next spring, we planted the potatoes here. So this is the potato field. And now you can see that in this potato field, some brassica is growing. It's Brassica napus. So it came from a year before. And we thought that the frost or winter is going to kill the brassica. So, but now you can see a lot of volunteer plants there in this field. So here I would like to suggest growers that before you plant any multi-species, you make sure that they will be killed by winter. If otherwise, they can become a problem. They can become a weed. So that's one of the learnings I would like to share with everyone over here. No doubt, there are so many benefits of planting of cover crops. At the Farm of the Future, because of cover crops, we have improved our soil structure, water infiltration. We do a lot of carbon sequestration. We have improved soil biology. We have completely prevented any kind of soil erosion. So there's so many benefits, right? So in this field here, you can see that this is the winter rye or fall rye. So we have a short growing season, and after harvesting potatoes, only thing we can plant is this winter rye, because most of the growers, they plant Russet Burbank, and we harvest Russet Burbank sometimes until 15th of October. So by then it's too cold to plant any other cover crops, say oats or barley. We don't get much out of it. So in this field, we broadcasted winter rye before harvesting potatoes. And so because of this winter rye, we prevented any kind of soil erosion in this field. You can see that there's no weed here. So if you plant the winter rye, you can really control your weeds. And then we keep feeding our soil biology. And this photo we took like in 20th of May. So by 20th of May or end of May, you can see that your winter rye can grow 3 to 4 feet. But now what you do, so now you have to terminate it. And we terminated it, and then we planted something in this field using our no-till machine. But winter rye has allelopathic effect on other crops. So our learning is that after winter rye, it's good to spray Roundup to terminate it before you plant something else. Otherwise, it can has allelopathic effect, and it will prevent seed germination or establishment of any grasses or even brassica or some of the legumes as well. And so this is the picture of faba bean. So in our cover crops blend, we include a lot of legumes, either it's beans or peas or clover or timothy, not timothy, alfalfa, to make sure that we fix some atmospheric nitrogen. You know why? Because our objective is to cut into synthetic fertilizers, and by inclusion of legumes in our cropping system through cover cropping, we have significantly cut in nitrogen rate, also in phosphorus and potassium. So at the Farm the Future, currently we have cut in 15% of nitrogen, around 40% of phosphorus, and over 50% in potassium, as compared to a typical grower in the area. So I would like to mention that by planting these cover crops, you can produce a lot of organic fertilizer as well. And by that way, you can reduce in your synthetic fertilizers and also in your pesticides, because we have a problem of nematodes, verticillium wilt, rhizoctonia. So to reduce the population of nematodes, we plant cover crops such as millet. And to reduce the inoculum of verticillium wilt, we have added cover crops such as brassica to reduce the inoculum of verticillium wilt. So when we select any cover crops, we make it sure that they don't become any weed problem. They not only help us in improving the organic matter, but also to reduce the inoculum of insect, pest, and disease or the pest infestation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Manphool. I think one thing that I'm hearing common thread across all three of you is these cover crops, they don't just do one thing. They do multiple things, and you're reaping the benefits of that in many different ways. So I'm really looking forward to circling back and talking with all three of you once again. Right now, we are going to shift to the three researchers that we've got on the call, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hear a little bit about their stories and what their work is with cover crops, and we're going to take this east to west now. So first up, we have B. B, welcome. What's your story with cover crops? Tell a little bit us about your experience.
So my experience with I'll give a brief introduction about how Maine's potato induction works. We plant about 56,000 acres of potato. About 20,000 of them are small grains and 8,000 broccoli. So we are probably a little slightly different than other crops. And since we have a short growing season, like Mr. Manphool said, you know, we usually plant around 10th of May, and then we're trying to harvest before October 15. And 60% of our growers are processing growers. So they plant French fries and chips, potatoes. So it needs a longer times to grow. And for cover crops to grow, it needs shorter times and fast growing that can cover the fall season. So our major rotations are potato, broccoli, barley, which is 8,000 of them have rotated this way. And the other one is potato and barley or oat, underseed with cover crops such as clover, ryegrass, or timothy. And the third one, which is getting popular, is potato with alfalfa. So they cut 2 years of alfalfa. Half of the growers are 2-year rotation, which just potatoes with small grains, or potatoes with cover crop mix. They mix between 3 to 6 cover crops with legume, grass, brassica, depends on the growers. So for this research, the reason I did this research is when I know of cover crop, it's usually covered in the winter. And so there's no covers in the winter. So I'm trying to see what are the optimum growth with the different planting date. As you can see in the picture, the first planting date is September 15, which some of the growers such as table salt or seed grower might already harvest, they have a chance to do it. So my treatments are winter rye and oats. So oats are mostly winter kill. And when we say we plant grain, we plant only spring grain. None of the oats or barley can overwinter in Maine. So all my treatments are oats or winter rye. And every 10 days is my planting days. As you can see, by October 25th, I didn't have any growth, but it does start to have some growth in the spring as a frost seeding. This is the second year of the research, and I'm trying to do my 3rd year research this coming year. And this past 2 years, September 15th has the most growth, and which most of the growers not able to, see. But October 5th and October 15th, we still can see some growth, depends on the growers. I just think that is a potential of growing another covers. If they want to start planting some winter rye as a grain, they can harvest until like June. So that's one story that I see.
Fantastic, thank you, B. Nice to see this visual layout here. That even on October 25th, that even though we're not seeing anything there, that we are going to see some of it in the spring. That's great to hear.
Sorry, another things to add is you can see some empty blocks in there. Those are fallow, is to mimic there's no cover crop growth. So in the springtime, we start to have a lot of weed problem, and especially Maine start to get warmer. I mean, we have less snow now, and when winter don't come. Like for example, last year we didn't have snow until January. So like Mr. Manphool said, some of the cover crop will start to regrow, and then we might come with a more challenging problem is how can we cover or kill those multi-species all and make sure they don't come back and, in the potato production.
Right. Excellent. Thank you, B. Okay, now we're moving east to west. We're gonna go from B to Mohammad. Mohammad, welcome.
Thanks, Cam. I'm located in Manitoba, so I'll cover some of the studies we had in the past. So my interest is to assess the effect of technologies and the management practices that affect agriculture and cropping system. So the question I have, as you see, do cover crop or certain crops in rotation benefit potatoes? I'll cover 3 section related to cover crop: food season cover crop, cover crop before potatoes and cover crop after potatoes. So I'm an ag economist, so I'll provide you some numbers with the experiment we had in the past. So I start with full season cover crop. With full season cover crop, we have Dr. Ramona Moore led a rotation study in Manitoba for 14 years. In that rotation, we had a crop, potato, canola, underseeded with alfalfa rotation, a 4-year rotation. That rotation that included alfalfa for 14 years provided the most stable yield and net return over 14 years. In fact, when I compared potato with alfalfa in rotation with potato without alfalfa, on average, more than $200 per acre per year, that rotation provided additional net revenue compared to other rotation. As you see in this figure that Cam showed, so potato and alfalfa rotation is always above the average over these 14 years. Notice potato canola rotation, a short rotation for the first 2 years, sorry, for the first 5 or 6 years is performing well, but notice after 5-6 years, it just basically collapses because of the disease buildup. If you show Cam the other figure again, back to when I compared, not this one, the other, this one. You see that the 4-year rotation, actually canola, alfalfa rotation is the same as performance is the same as potato, wheat, canola, wheat rotation. You see how after 6 years, the project started 1998. So after 4 or 5 years, how basically disease buildup in canola, potato rotation, and we see basically the yield reduction and yield loss of potato. So other rotation that we had for the full season was bean, barley, red clover, potato in PEI led by Dr. Judith Nyanza. And we had another rotation with sorghum Sudan grass, and that rotation provided additional 10% yield compared to red clover. When we put a dollar value, more than 300 per acre per year, additional net return of a different full season crop, cover crop. So that was through a study for the full season crop. Now, cover crop after potato, before potato, sorry. Cover crop before potato, again with Judith, we had a study in PEI. When we had with typical rotation, barley, red clover, potato, we had another rotation with sorghum Sudan grass plus winter cover. So that rotation, we done it for 3 years. We had additional $190 per acre per year because of that combination of winter cover and Sudan grass, not just cover crop, but a combination of Sudan grass and winter cover. Winter cover was winter rape. So that was before potato, additional $190 per acre per year. Recently, Brian Barrett did a number of cover crop before potato as part of Living Lab study in PEI, and he showed 11% yield improvement for using cover crop before potato. That basically, that is equivalent to about more than 300 net return per acre per year. In Alberta, Dr. Frank Larney conducted a 12 years of different potato rotation, and was part of that study, 12-year rotation. Two things were we basically investigated in those 12 years rotation, adding cover crop and adding compost. So those rotation that had this conservation practices, we noticed 12% yield benefit. So that is equivalent to about $115 to $250 additional net benefit because of the conservation practices. As I said, conservation practices was cover crop and compost. This is for 12 years, different rotation from 3 years to 4 years to 5 years to 6 years rotation. So, and then cover crop after potato. Cover crop after potato. So again, in PEI, barley, red clover, potato is a typical rotation. We replace barley with either winter rye or winter wheat. This Manphool mentioned about winter wheat as a cover crop. So again, this is study led by Judith Nerienza, and I was part of it. So barley, when barley replaced with winter rye, we done it in 2016 and 2017, we noticed $40 additional net return per acre of the winter rye. For winter wheat, that was exceptional. We noticed $240 per acre per year compared to barley, barley as part of barley, red clover, potato rotation. So there is a study we done in the past that shows the benefit of cover crop, and I provided you some numbers. There are additional benefit of course, cover crop in terms of reducing erosion. For example, a study in PEI showed with cover crop, we can reduce the erosion, and there is, when we reduce erosion, there is yield benefit, and there is, of course, nitrogen benefit. I'll cover, if there is a question, I'll cover those parts later.
Thank you so much, Mohammad. And I think one of the things that I'm getting from what you've just shared is, you know, cover crops on their own are great, but cover crops in combination with some of these other things, maybe different full season or compost or some of the other things, you can kind of multiply the benefits a little bit.
That's absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, finally, we're gonna end off with Ray. Ray is joining us from Oregon. Welcome, Ray.
Hello, can you see my picture, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Cam. My name is Ray. I located in OSU Hermiston Station, and the big region for this region we call Columbia Basin, one of the most important potato production region for this country. First is about the weather in this region. So usually from May to September, we rarely see any precipitation or any rainfall, so fully depend on the irrigation. And started year 2019, I started work on cover crop. So the reason for cover crop is, in general, for the potato production, in many cases, grower will grow cover crop, usually use mustard. The purpose is for the disease control, because mustard can be a biofumigant. So some grower also use a winter wheat as a cover crop. In general, the idea just for soil fertility or just a cover soil for the soil erosion control. So this is a general idea for the region, but quite a lot of growers also choose to keep the soil fallow. The problems are from the winter time, there's always, kind of so early winter time, the whole season, always there's some time there's very heavy wind. But during winter time, because no field cover, so there's a lot of dust. So the idea, I try to study the cover crops, try to increase diversity of a cover crop, because I think only two options are quite limited, and it's not so good for the whole cropping system. About the crop yield system for the region, the typical one for potato is either 3-year rotation or 4-year rotation. For example, we grow wheat, then followed by corn, then followed by potato, or then again. So some growers, they choose wheat, corn, onion, and potato is a 4-year rotation. So potato and onion is mainly cash crops. So the wheat and the corn is a rotational crop. So this is a cropping system. So from 2019 to 2020, my main focus tried to check which kind of cow crop work better. So we include warm season cow crop, cool season cow crop. And for the crop species, we include, in general, the big groups, grass, like wheat or triticale, or brassica family, or the legume family. And then the year 2021, I started to narrow down the crop. So we left around 10 cover crop. We try to understand how the cover crop impact potato production and also impact the soil health. For this picture, I saw it's my graduate students' ideas. They try to compare the different planting date, how the cow crop performance look like, and how the cow crop impact potato production. In this study, we included 9 cover crop options, include wheat, barley, triticale, ryegrass, and also legume crop include pea, hairy vetch, the brassica family is brassica, is forage brassica, turnip, kale, mustard, and radish. All those crops in the past they performed, they can survive in the winter because during winter time we have 1 or 2 months we can easily get a temperature lower than 0 degrees. So this is the purpose, and also include 2 treatment mixed with triticale and pea or triticale and mustard. Try to check how the performance look like. For this picture, we planted in September 9, 2022, last year. So let's move to next picture, Cam. Yeah, this is I took the picture around late November. So you can see when the first frost come, and quite a lot cow crop suffers the stress. And so actually by end, we only have a few crops survive because last year there's very tough winter time. So end up, we only have brassica, turnip, they survived through the winter. All legume crop, pea and hairy vetch, they are successful. And wheat, barley, triticale, ryegrass. So this grass family also survived. But in the beginning, they all received quite a lot. Their growth is really suppressed. So yeah, this is how the field look like during the late November. So this is about the second planting date for the late October. So quite a lot of plant actually cannot germinate. This is a picture I take in December. So you can see the closest one is a cereal crop. You can see the crop. If go further, unfortunately picture too small. So some brassica family, they can germinate a very tiny bit. Then next frost come, they killed. So the planting dates is quite important for the cow crop. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, this is my special field trial about soil fumigation and the cow crop, because fumigation is a very typical practice for potato production for control the soil boll disease, nematodes, and because this is a volatile pesticide, suppose besides they control the disease, they maybe also impact the soil microbes and impact the soil health. So I use a different cow crop, try to check if those cow crop can recover the soil health. The near picture is about the legume crop is Austria pea mixed with hairy veg. Then another green one that is a wheat wheat. For the rest two treatment, one I use the mustard, another use the radish, all killed by the winter frost. Yeah, this is the whole picture. I'm working on the cow crop. In general, I can summarize two projects. One is a cover crop selection, another fumigation. Each crop is a cover crop. Yeah, this is my story.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
There you go, everyone. You got the across North America tour of what different growers and different researchers are doing. So what I'm going to do now is invite all of you, the growers and the researchers, to turn your cameras back on. And we're just going to try and land this plane. So we're here to talk about how do we make cover crops pay in potatoes. And I think if you're hearing the same thing that I'm hearing, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. There's not just one way. But so to kind of get a bit of, to narrow down what our recipe for success would be, if we could start laying out a recipe for success, what have you heard from the other panelists, or what do you want to share from your own experience that, you know, here is a key step, or here's a key ingredient that I think we need to focus on in order to make cover crops pay, in order for them to make business sense. Why don't I go to Mike first? Mike, would you kick us off? Something that either from your experience or something that you've heard already said on this panel, it's kind of a critical step for making cover crops pay in potatoes.
Yeah, I think, you know, putting everybody's kind of stories together and thinking about our own, I think first and foremost is what are the goals you're out to achieve? What are you trying to do with a cover crop? And know how that currently fits into your production system, and then how your production system might change or be modified if you're to achieve those goals. Like if I want to put in cover crops for disease suppression, what are the things that I need to focus on, and what are the goals when I do get that cover crop in place? How am I measuring whether I'm having an impact? And then you can understand, maybe disease control isn't the thing I need to focus on. Maybe I'm better served looking at nutrient management, soil health, soil tilth, some of these other things that I'll get to disease management eventually. But that may not be the least common denominator that I'm chasing today. So understanding that, I think, is key.
So know your goal when you set out, but be flexible because you might get you might have to take a bit of a detour to get there. I heard someone once say, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." Anybody want to build on that? You know, so we're building a recipe for success. Know your goal, know what you're trying to achieve, be flexible in getting there. Who wants to kind of jump in and flesh that recipe out a bit more?
I guess I'll add one additional, you know, as we know, some of this benefit, whatever the goal is, it takes time to see the benefit. If we just look at a short window, we may not see a benefit, but as I shown in some of the studies I shared with you, it takes time to see the benefit, and especially with cover crop, whether it is before potato, whether it's after potato, whether it's a full season potato, full season cover crop. So it takes time. So of course there is upfront cost of the cover crop plus additional management. So think of cover crop as a investment. You know, it's potato is high value crop, very capital intensive. So you do land investment as part of any business, you do investment. So think of a cover crop maybe as an investment. You may not see a benefit right away, but you will see the benefit in longer term.
Yeah, I fully agree. Based on I forgot to mention about our data. So our field trial shows the cover crop, they really can improve the soil microbe activity. So we use a microbial biomass as an indicator, so it really increased. But regarding the potato yield, you didn't see, so far we didn't see any impact. So cannot say the cover crops benefit or there's a negative, but of course it's 1 year data. So, but for in general, particularly for our region, we have the heavy soil erosion happening. So I believe with cover crop is quite important in a long run. So the cover crop should be a sustainable solution for the region. But we do need to think about the investment, like the cost for the seeds or other practice. Yeah.
Well, I can go. There are so many benefits of planting cover crops, right? We all know that. But there's a lot of learning. Once you start planting those cover crops, especially like nowadays, scientists, researchers, they recommend that, hey, go for multi-species, right? And then they mix the seed of 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 species, right? And then you plant them. But there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of learning. So if any grower wants to start it, he should make it sure that they should not become a problem. What species he should be planting, when he should be planting, what the blend look like, right? And then how he's going to terminate them, because everything costs him money. So that's really important. That's what we have been experiencing at the Farm of the Future. So there's a lot of learning. And I always advise our growers that start with small. And if any grower wants to plant any cover crops, it's good if you can talk with any experienced grower or any researcher who has experience in planting that particular cover crop. That's really important. Another thing, here in Maritimes, when we plant our grains, we plant some underseeded species with them, say clover, timothy, alfalfa, perennial ryegrass. We can harvest our grains and we can sell it in the market. And then we allow our cover crops to grow, right? So in that way, a grower doesn't have to just plant the cover crops, right? Because we can plant our grains along with the cover crops. So that would not cost him like extra money, except that the seed cost. So we should make it sure that it doesn't cost a grower a lot of money. So that there are so many ways. And as I have given another example before, say if you can plant winter wheat after potatoes, especially after early varieties of potatoes, or sometimes you can after the late varieties, then the winter rye can work as a cover crop, and then you can harvest it as a cash crop next year. And winter rye, that can control your weeds as well, right? So there are a lot of learning. So also, like some companies now, they are selling the seed of different multi-species, and there are 7, 8, 9, 10 species. And when you buy the seed of those multi-species, they cost you way more money. After this COVID thing, I don't know what happened. You are just paying double, right? So for per acre, sometimes you pay like $130 for planting a blend of cover crops, right? So do you need all those 8, 9, 10 species, right? And so I started with 8, 9, 10 species, right? But then when we go back into the field, then we see, hey, I should have not planted those 3, 4 species, right? Based on your plant stand, the performance, right? So therefore, there is a lot of learning before any grower starts planting these cover crops.
Thank you, Manphool. B, Lad, I don't know if you got anything you want to add for key things to think about, key steps for that recipe for success.
I'll just go ahead. You can go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
No, I was just going to echo what was said. I think it was great. I think, like, first and foremost, identify your goals, what you want to do. And it's very dependent and specific on your geography, on your region, where you're at, your climate. There's so many variables. So I think probably the best advice that I could give is find somebody that's doing what you're doing and model after them. So say, hey, I see what you're doing. How can I learn from you? Because the saying goes something like, a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from other mistakes. So yeah, that's what I would say, is model after somebody who's doing something that you want to do and learn from them and just build upon it.
So I add a little bit extra thing is, from my experience, soil erosion or weed suppressions is probably like the instant effect. If you start adding cover crop for your fall seasons, you will start to see reduce of soil erosion, reduce of weed suppressions. It depends on what you grow. But like everyone said, goal, what exactly you want to begin with. And if we start treating soil erosion as money losing, I guess everyone would think profitable in a different way.
That's a good call out, B. Yeah, and it's good to think too, like there are some of these goals that we can see the benefits of them sooner. Some of them take a little bit longer to realize those benefits. I want to throw out, just before we kind of go to the questions, I see there's a bunch of questions here. I want to throw out a bit of a provocative idea that's kind of appeared to me through the course of this conversation. A lot of times when we talk about cover crops, we are thinking about those shoulder seasons. So like before and after the potato crop into the next crop. But what a lot of you have talked about is you've talked about cover crops that grow beyond the shoulder season, or cover crops that are growing alongside your cash crop, your potato crop, or cover crops that actually just end up becoming one of your rotation crops, in a sense, like for those who are using them for soil building practices. So is this almost a bit of an idea of like more is better? Like we can see the benefit, a little bit of the benefit in the shoulder season, but we benefit a whole lot more if we just increased how much time that these cover crops had to go. Is that a part of a recipe for success as well?
We have been doing a lot of trialing, testing, right? So we follow 3 years of crop rotation, but in the area, some of the growers follow only 2 years of crop rotation, some of 3, right? And who follow 2 years rotation. So in year 1, they plant potatoes. In year 2, they plant either any grain or corn or soybean. And they hardly, I shouldn't say hardly, but they make very little money when they plant grains or soybean, right? And how I take it that, well, if we can replace that grain or soybean with the multi-species spring cover crops, and then if we can build our soil health, right? Produce some organic fertilizer, and then maybe we can increase 5-10% yield of potatoes. So in that way, maybe you can make more money, right, out of it. But it's still at the trial stage. We really don't know. But when you talk with the grower and when you tell him that, hey, you can replace your cash crop with a cover crop, right? It's a little hard until you really don't have the data. And it takes a while. It takes like 4, 5, 6 years, right? And then potato, like you need at least 2-3 crop years of data, right? Then you can you can conclude it, right? But my advice is that maybe it's good idea that you can plant them after potatoes, right? Or you plant cover crops with your grains, right? So still growers are making money. They don't have to change much in their rotation systems, but still you can improve your soil health, you can improve your soil biology, you can protect your soil erosion, you can increase your water infiltration because like in like maritime, like we have slopes, hills, right? And during early winter or late winter, early spring, there's a lot of soil erosion. Once you harvested potatoes, right? But if you can broadcast seed of winter rye before harvesting potatoes, that can protect our ground during winter time, early spring. So that's what we want, right? And then we can prevent some weeds too. And then once growers like are comfortable with that, then once they see the benefit of that, then maybe they want to replace their grain or something with the cover crops.
Just kind of get your feet wet a little bit first, and then you can start expanding. Lad, you mentioned this as one of the things that you are actively doing and you're collecting data on, is you are taking some acres out of trying to get another cash crop in the rotation, and you're just soil building. Can you talk a little bit about how that pencils out for you budget-wise?
Yeah, I mean, Manphool was just talking about, which I thought was great. So where we're located, we're in Idaho, and we're fairly limited on our crops that we can put in our rotation. So most of the time, usually preceding potatoes in our area, normally 90% of the time, I'd say it's small grains, maybe 10% of the time it's alfalfa or something like that. But 90% of the time, it's probably small grains that precedes potatoes. So traditionally before, I've always tried to get a cover crop in ASAP. As soon as I get that grain harvested, I'm getting a cover crop in there, getting it established as quick as I can. Sometimes we're limited due to the climate when we have our first hard freeze about how much growth I get. And I think there's tremendous benefits. I mean, you're increasing soil biology, you're adding organic matter, you're stimulating the microbial activity in the soil, you're fixing nitrogen, you're doing so many good things that with the current market of small grains, and it's always different, it depends every year, but most of the time you can go anywhere from break even to lose a little bit to be slightly profitable. And maybe most people are better marketers than me, but most of the time that's the case for us. So what our thoughts are is if we can dedicate a whole year and we're just going to remove the small grain out of the system and we're going to dedicate a whole year, there's going to be no cash crop, but we're going to implement a very diverse species of cover crops, possibly two different planting dates, but maybe just one single cover crop, but maybe two. But if we can devote an entire year to soil health building, how's that going to affect the potato crop the following year? Is that going to give us an earlier head start? Is it going to be more disease resistant, more resilient? Is it going to be able to withstand pests better? Is it going to have better tuber set numbers, better tuber growth? So there's so many variables and it's hard to say exactly, because this is actually my first time doing this, taking out a section and dedicate. I've done cover crops ever since I first started farming, but to dedicate an entire year to it instead of just part of the rotation is something different. So my hopes is we'll have the data next year to say, hey, this works or it doesn't work. And to me, that's great. If it doesn't work, that's totally understandable. That's part of the trial and error of doing new things. You figure out what works, what doesn't work. Maybe we could have used different species, timed it different. But anyways, yeah, I think it's super beneficial to have this research and growers that can come together and say, hey, this works, this doesn't, let's try this. And just be a little bit open-minded about trying different things. And that's hard for farmers. It's hard for me, it's hard for everybody, but to try things just a little different, it's a step, but I think it's important in this whole regenerative and sustainable framework to try just things that might be a little different. Don't go too fast, but just what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, continuous improvement. Yep. Yeah. Okay, Mac, I'm going to invite you back on. This has been great. I've loved hearing all these thoughts from you folks, and we've got a number of questions in the chat. Mac, I hope that you're able to kind of sort through a few of those, and you've got a few on deck for us here.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of great questions asked. So I'll just start walking through them. And I know Mike and Manphool, you've actually answered some of them, but I may bring them back up just for the rest of the group here. But the first one actually, Lad, is more geared towards your pollinator strips. And there's several questions kind of tied up into this one. The first one is, how did you come up with the size of your pollinator strip to determine if it was an effective size or not? And it, like, it's the person asked this specific to you, but also mentioned, you know, other panelists could reply as well.
Okay, sorry, I'm just reading it real quick.
Yep, no, you're good.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So this is my first year doing pollinator strips. In the past, I've done pollinator islands. So we've done islands throughout a commercial potato crop to attract insects instead of actual strips. Strips, I think from a management standpoint, is easier than islands. And so as far as what is effective, I wish I could give an answer. I hope another year or two I could give an answer. I don't know the exact distance. But from my perspective, the more species, the more varying times of flowering, the more beneficial insects that you're attracting. So that's probably what I would recommend. It's probably super dependent on your geography, what pests are more prevalent in your area, what beneficials are more prevalent. So probably very dependent, but yeah, sorry, if anybody else wants to then go for it.
Did you just come up with the size of that strip because that was the land available in between fields?
Yeah, so like, for example, that one in the picture, that was 3 potato rows that were taken out of production. So we shut off the rows there, we didn't plant spuds, and it just dedicated it to a pollinator strip. So that was just based on our preference, that size of that pollinator strip.
Yeah, so can I add something here, Mac? We have been planting those strips for a couple of years. It's called Syngenta seed pollinator. That includes 6 different species, 3 different kinds of clovers, timothy, phacelia, right? And we plant them around the field, but not where we really cannot harvest, where we really cannot plant, right? We don't put our productive ground under that seed pollinator, and we plant where we cannot grow potatoes or whatever, right? Another learning was that because when you plant this seed pollinator, most of them perennials, like the clover, it takes them a while to establish. And by then, you see a lot of weeds that are growing over there, because weeds, they're annual, right? They grow really fast. So before you plant this kind of seed pollinator, my advice is that maybe you add 30 pounds of oats per acre or something like that, so that you don't end up with weeds. That's another thing I have seen at the Farm of the Future.
No, very good. And I guess before we go on to the second part of this question, which Manphool, you actually touched on in your presentation, does anybody else want to add to kind of the pollinator strip size before we go on? Okay. So yeah, the next couple of questions are surrounded around the seed and purchasing the seed and where to find the seed for pollinator strips. So do you buy the seed? Is there a wide market for these species? And have you considered trees as permanent strips against pests?
So you, probably the majority of the time, you could get pollinator seed from any traditional cover crop seed dealer. So we have some local ones in the area. There's also some national ones that are super easy to order online. And a lot of times they'll custom tailor your mix to what you're looking for. Hey, I'm trying to attract this or this. So I would just speak with whoever that dealer is. And then to follow that, permanent strips, I've never considered that. And I guess that could be a possibility everything's irrigated here. So if we had permanent things, it'd be difficult, whether that's center pivot or wheel lines or whatever it is. So it might not be the best option for us.
Very good.
Mac, I would say one of the experiences with bringing in seed of especially these blends is you got to be very careful of who you do business with, because you can bring noxious weeds onto your farm. We've had experience of bringing in Jimson weed. We've had experiences bringing in Palmer amaranth and tall water hemp, and these kind of things come with these blends where you have 3-4 different species in there. If you don't know the source, you can open yourself up to creating problems too.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, good comment. Maybe that goes back to Lad's comment about, someone who's done it before and has seen it work. So if your neighbor's using clean seed, go to that, maybe you go to that same seed source to get it. But very good. Okay, so we'll keep moving along here through the questions. So the next one is about trap crops around the border of potatoes. So these crops, you would plant them to protect the potato crop. So in theory, something like, and in the question they use tuber worm, moving from peas after the peas are harvested to the area. In theory, these trap crops would trap these insects or pests, and then you could go in and terminate these pests in the edges of the field with these trap crops. Has anybody used these or experimented with these? If so, what have we learned?
I think we've tried them in the past. And when I say we, is our region has. So different growers have tried it. I think our biggest challenge with it is logistically the amount of footprint that you have to take on. Because we're farming, our farm in particular, we farm 20,000 acres, 9,000 of which is potatoes. And to manage all these very small bits and pieces that are set aside just to trap insects, logistically extremely hard. And we haven't seen the benefit that we catch enough. So if we go out and put in like untreated a potato variety that Colorado potato beetles really love to hit, the problem is we then have to manage several hundred of these 2 or 4 row strips. So that comes at a huge cost to the system then. And so it's a huge logistics balance when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments with trap crops? Oh, very good. Thanks, Mike. Okay, the next question is centered around cover crops and the need for tillage. So Anthony says, I've seen some instances where growers working with winter wheat only break soil once or till once. However, there's an issue with stubble and residue. He's wondering if others have seen something similar. And I know, Mike, you talked about in central Wisconsin, the vegetable processors and their strict guidelines with residue. Does anybody else have something to add to this question?
I can add.
Yeah. Go for it, Lad.
Yeah. So what we try to do a single tillage pass. So post harvest, if it's wheat or whatever it is, we're right there with the cover crop, and that stays in there. And we don't till it till the spring. We do a single tillage pass preceding planting. Doesn't always work. It's not always a perfect story, but that's what I try to do. And the issue is, okay, well, what about residue? So hopefully you're getting to a point where you got your carbon and nitrogen ratio in a correct place, and you got good soil biology. And when I've seen that work, it decomposes residue at a level very above something that doesn't have their carbon and nitrogen ratio correct, or something like that. So does it work in every situation? Probably not, but the better biology you have, the better carbon and nitrogen ratio, you're going to get it decomposed quicker, and maybe be able to eliminate tillage, which is not eliminate, but strongly reduce it.
And then not have the residue management issue later on. Yeah, no, very good. Anthony also asked, and this is an interesting question specific to the Northwest. So it's about using sagebrush as part of your rotation, just because, so there's been some researchers that have found these soils that were in sagebrush prior to potatoes have been high yielding. And the thought is this is due to the soil microbiome. So the question comes, what does the group think about this idea of incorporating sagebrush into the rotation? And has anyone seen anything similar with native biomes being integrated into potato cropping rotations?
Sorry, I can add one thing there real quick. So I have some organic farms too, and one of my organic farms, we broke it out of native grass. So not sagebrush, but native grass, probably been grass for 30 years. super minimal inputs that year, probably compost and a couple additional biological products. Holy cow, killer crop. It was freaking awesome, man. It was such a good, solid size profile, yield, quality, everything was off the charts. And the only thing I could attribute it to was the soil biology and the biome, the healthy soil, the untilled soil. Just the biology was able to produce this amazing crop. And I think that's really part of what happened. That's what we want to get back to, is how do you achieve that soil biology where it's in native grass or in sagebrush? Because it's awesome. But it's hard when you're trying to incorporate commercial agriculture. It's difficult to try to get to that point. But yeah, I do not see any reason why soil biology does not benefit from native plants. And
I want to chime in here too, Mac, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've been working with McCain over the past 18 months, and last year we, myself and a colleague, David Lamb, we went out and we sampled a whole bunch of sites across McCain's North American growing regions with the 3 recommended tests that the Soil Health Institute is recommending right now. So those are organic carbon mineralization potential, which is a measure of microbial activity, and aggregate stability. And so we took these samples at all these different locations, and particularly in the Pacific Northwest. We took these samples, and I totally agree with the comment that was made and all that Lad has said. You know, and the growers and the agronomists there were telling us this too. Your organic matter levels are lower in the sagebrush, in the native sagebrush, because where you've been cropping and irrigating, you've got more organic matter that's being returned to that soil. And so organic matter isn't the only driver of it. Especially on the sandy soils, you don't necessarily see the aggregate stability difference, but we did tend to see a consistent difference in that carbon mineralization potential, the microbial activity of that soil and that sagebrush. So absolutely, to support what Lad has said, that we, from the data that we've gathered, we are seeing that in these kind of native areas, there's a microbial community there that even without the rain, you know, it's really healthy, it's really active. And so, yeah, as much as you can do to reduce soil disturbance, to feed the biology of your soil, I think you're going to start seeing more and more your cropping fields starting to kind of mimic a little bit what's going on there as you do things that the soil organisms like.
Very good. Thank you, Cam. Anybody else want to add to those answers before we move on? All right, excellent. So the next question is around machinery. So the question is, what are your views with regard to machinery? And specifically, does the type of machinery used affect the outcome? So can you use normal equipment you have on the farm to accomplish the establishment of cover crops? Do you need specific machinery? Does it matter? What are your thoughts?
I think for us, a lot of it goes back to the logistics. Obviously, a lot of the growers think that, what you have to accept is something that maybe isn't picture perfect or aesthetically pleasing, because you need to minimize the amount of trips, because not only from a soil disturbance and soil health aspect, but we have to put somebody in a tractor, we have to put an implement in the field that affects our bottom line. And so because we want a cover crop doesn't mean we have to go out and add all these additional events that happen in the field. And so if we're able to do that with a cultivation that's already occurring or with some event that's already occurring, you may not get this tabletop field of a cover crop. It may look ugly, but it's about the presence of the crop. If you can get that crop out there, it may not be 100% stand, but that's okay because it's in a position where you wouldn't have normally had it. And it's kind of this stepwise approach. And then you ask the next question, how can I do better? But the way we go at certain cover crops, I think a lot for us depends on what's the next crop, whether it's a canning crop or whether it's a grain crop or something like that. But then also, what's the stage that we need to incorporate that crop at? Are we still fairly vegetative, or because planting dates have bumped back on the sweet corn crop, now we're dealing with rye that's up to your eyeballs? That's now going to be a whole new set of challenges. And so it's managing it throughout. You can't ignore it, but at the same time, you have to have answers for everything.
I can add here, and I totally agree with Mike. So we want to reduce the number of passes because every single pass costs $20–25 per acre to a grower, right? So for example, when we prepare our ground and plant the cover crops in fall, because we prepare our ground for potatoes in fall. So we put our air seeder on the back of the healer so that in one pass, we can make the hills and plant the cover crops. Also, when it comes to the termination of cover crops, you have to make a lot of passes because we have replaced mold board plow with chisel plow. Maybe you have to make 2–3 passes of chisel plow to terminate the crop. You really don't want that. And growers doesn't have time to do that, right? So now what we are thinking is that, well, we can put our mower in the front, chisel plow in the back. And before that, maybe you want to spray Roundup. Because when you have the perennial crops sometimes or huge cover crops, it's hard to terminate in 1 or 2 passes of chisel plow. And if you do so, you think that, oh, you have done a good job. But when you plant your potatoes, then you see that those cover crops are coming back. So the termination is the huge issue. I mean, when we recommend our growers to plant any cover crops, especially the perennials, sometimes it's hard to terminate them without Roundup. So it's a lot of learning. We are testing, combinations of different methods, maybe chisel plow, quick feed, and Roundup, and then how we can reduce the number of passes. So yes, but every grower is different, right? They have the different kind of equipment, right? But we need to really reduce the number of passes. Otherwise, it is not possible because growers are busy all the time, either it's a spring or the fall.
No, very good. So yeah, the type of equipment, we're still learning, right? It depends on the practice, the equipment available, but that's part of the learning process for sure. Cam, do we have time for one more question?
Just want to add few second comment if that's possible.
Yeah, go for it, Mohammad.
So one thing we didn't talk about is the nitrogen credit benefit of the cover crop and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So nitrogen is a big part of greenhouse gas emission, and if we can reduce it by having cover crop in the rotation, the more operation we do, the more fuel we use. So the basically counterbalance the benefit. So of course, as Manphool mentioned, a lot of this cover cropping is a learning process, but if there is a credit, and of course there is credit from the nitrogen benefit credit from for having cover crop in the rotation, but the more passes we do, we lose some of those benefits because nitrogen and fuel is a big part of greenhouse gas emission.
Yeah, very good. Great add.
Yeah, I would add some. So for example, in our region, timing is very important. So plant as soon as possible should be better if you want to increase the biomass. And also the mixed several crops should be better. For termination, usually they use Roundup to kill based on what I saw from farmers' field.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you. And I know we didn't answer all the questions, but we appreciate the participants putting them in there, and also the panelists for answering some of them in the chat. So Cam, I'll turn it back to you real fast.
Yeah, my colleague Catherine has just dropped a link there in the chat. We would really love if you just fill out that short survey and let us know if what your experience was with this event. Was it helpful for you? There's some options there to follow up if you've got other questions or needs related to that. So with that, Mac, do you want to say anything about contact info here? You can reach out to us at these emails if you need to.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so you see Cam's information there, my information, Amanda's, and also Spencer Carabellis-Pittman. He's our sustainability manager. So feel free to contact us, reach out with any questions. Just a big thank you to Cam and the panelists for putting this together. It's been awesome. We really appreciate the support and the participation. And with that, one last thing, we do have some soil health and just general field days. So please reach out to your McCain field rep or agronomist for those dates of the field days in your area. But yeah, thanks again, and we'll see you down the road.